Big news today with the release of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. What's your response? Because she was, of course, she was captured in Iran while you were Prime Minister.
Well, it's a piece of good news that we've all been waiting to hear for so long. And you can just only imagine what it'd be like to be separated from your family for so long and to have so much heartache. And you just feel for this family getting back together again and wish them well. It's fantastic news.
Let's talk about Ukraine. That's obviously the thing that overshadows everything else. If you were Prime Minister today, would you rule out a no-fly zone?
I'm afraid I would. You know, in our hearts, every shred of our being wants to do everything we can to help the Ukrainians in their struggle. And we are helping. We're helping with weapons. We help with training. We're helping with refugees. There's more we can do on humanitarian aid. But I think we have to be very clear with our friends and allies and people we care deeply about. We must be clear about what we can do. But I'm afraid we also have to be clear about what we can't do. That said, there are more things that we can do.
Like what?
Well, I think the process started under my premiership of sending more troops to frontline states in NATO, to Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Let's turn some of those into permanent bases. Let's be absolutely clear about the strength of Article 5 and our commitment to defend every inch of NATO territory. Let's do more on humanitarian aid. We achieved 0.7% of GDP in our aid payments. I'm sad we've gone away from that. I hope we can get back to it. Let's, with the EU, lead the donor conference, lead the aid effort. Let's have a dedicated aid minister in the cabinet doing development. The Foreign Office ministers do a great job, but it'd be good to have someone who's 100% dedicated to humanitarian aid and development.
Is there a danger here that this could turn into World War III?
Well, look, what Putin has done is so much more ghastly and awful than many people predicted that I think it's very dangerous to predict what he might do next. I think the best thing we can do is be absolutely clear about how vital Article 5 is, how vital NATO is, to be absolutely clear about the consequences of that sort of action.
But the road to Ukraine, one could say, is paved with Western regrets, isn't it? And I just want to talk about some of your regrets, if you have them. Regret number one, you went to Moscow in 2011. You gave a speech at the State University of Moscow where you said, we, Britain and Russia, have to be stronger together.
Well, there were things we needed to do together.
I wonder if you regret those words now.
No, what I regret is in 2008, when I was leader of the opposition, and when Russia effectively invaded Georgia, I went to Tbilisi to show solidarity with President Saakashvili. And if you look at the Western response to Georgia, it was feeble. There weren't sanctions. There wasn't pressure put in place. We should have done that in 2008, and we did behave differently in 2012 when Putin invaded Crimea. Was it necessary in 2014? That was the lessons in 2008. I actually said in Georgia, what will be next? Ukraine?
But you gave that speech in 2011, and that was 3 years after Georgia, and it was 5 years after the murder of Litvinenko on this, in a London hotel.
Well, and we kept up rightly all those measures put in place after the dreadful murder of Litvinenko. We didn't change that. But if you remember, when I became Prime Minister in 2010, this was a period when Medvedev, ultimately Putin's puppet, but he was the president. And there was a sense that, look, you had to try and find a way of working with these people. We had to work together over terrorism. We had to work together over climate change. We had to work together over banking regulation.
You thought you could do business with Vladimir Putin at the time?
I thought we had to do business with Russia and its leadership, which at that time was more Medvedev than Putin.
But again, going back to the fact that, there were people in Eastern Europe who were warning us about Vladimir Putin, in the late noughties, in fact, even earlier than that. Do you now regret that you weren't tougher on him at the time? That even in 2011, you courted him in Moscow. You took the head of BP with you on that plane, and then when he gave that speech about stronger together, those words sound very bitter now.
What we did was we led the effort to throw Putin out of the G8. That was a British initiative. We led the effort on sanctions in 2014 because of what happened in Crimea. And when I think back to that time, we were trying to persuade, the French at that stage were selling warships to the Russians.
But I wonder if there's a final regret here. And that is our relationship, your relationship, the Tory party's relationship with money. When you were Prime Minister, we courted the golden era with Xi Jinping. that was about business with China. There was,
But it wasn't just about, I mean, with China, it was also about trying to build a relationship that recognized that the rise of China is an inevitability.
Yes.
And how do we try and make that
But
rise
I just
safe?
wonder if we were, whether it's Russian oligarchs in London, gas deals with Vladimir Putin, cozying up to the Chinese for all sorts of reasons, or indeed, in your own case, the Green Seal thing, which you have apologized for. Is money the Achilles heel of your party and of you?
No, I think, look, if you look at London has always been a great financial centre, and everyone comes to invest here and work here, and that is part of what makes London a success. But I've never accepted that you can't at the same time have the highest standards. I passed in 2010 the Bribery Act, which was the toughest anti-bribery legislation anywhere in a major economy. I used my G8 in Northern Ireland in 2013 to lead on the issue of transparency about ownership, who owned what company, so that Britain was the first major company to have a register of open beneficial ownership. We can combine being a great financial centre and welcoming people's investment here with very high standards. Indeed, we should.
But have we really? I mean, we've had oligarchs basically living the high life in London until a few weeks ago. Their assets have only been seized now. These were people proven to be close to Vladimir Putin, flourishing here for years.
Well, we took the sanctions action in 2014 after Crimea, and we targeted a whole we targeted a whole series of individuals and did it very quickly. That's being done again now, and rightly, in a very robust way because of what has happened. But if the argument is that somehow Russian investment in Britain or very small numbers of Russians supporting the Conservative Party somehow changed our policy, I would say that is complete nonsense.
What about Yevgeny Lebedev and Boris Johnson?
Look, that's for the Prime Minister to explain and to defend. I made the appointments
Intelligence services saying it was a bad idea and he overruled them and made him a Lord anyway?
Look, as I say, that is for him to answer. The House of Lords Appointments Commission is an important body. I always listen to it very carefully. But I'm not here to start throwing bricks at the Prime Minister at this moment.